following this event on television or online. Welcome to the United Nations Trusteeship Council Chambers, which is a befitting venue to send off a person of Mama Winnie's stature, who fought for South Africa, who fought for Africa, and who fought for the world. 2nd of April holds a special significance for me. As I woke up to start my first day as Special Advisor on Africa at the United Nations, we heard the news that Mama Winnie has transitioned our world. It is because 46 years ago, as a student and a young woman in South Africa, during the Soweto uprising, she inspired me, and I followed her call for women not to take the backseat in the struggle for freedom, but rather to be at the forefront. So I'm here as Beans governors from Namibia, who found courage from Mama Winnie to fight for freedom, for justice and peace in my own country. It is therefore my great honor today to serve as Director of Ceremonies for this special memorial service. We are all here to honor and to celebrate the life and times of Mama Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. Let's start the celebration by bringing the land of her birth into the halls of the United Nations and invite Nosipho Sibanyoni from South Africa for a tribute to Mama Winnie. Enzika Nosipho.
Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Mthembu lomuhle mbali kaJongilizwe ngibhali yadalinjebo sihlangene lamhla lapha esibayeni seTV kamhlabuhlangene sitobonga wena sitovumela sonke ukuthi ube sibonele lesihle sebufati waba sitobonele lesihle sekubangimake wagadza tonke TV lepetise phasakho watigadza wabangimake wadotonke TV tebenguni tendasi neAfrika waba ngumnguni sibili waba inkunzi lemnyama babe bathi bayakuphusha waphakamisa isandla wathi ngithanga indzawo bantwa bami ngilwela bantwa bami waphakamisa isandla babe bathi bayakuphusha waphakamisa isandla wema wedva ukhombisa kona ukuthi wena ulilambo wedakto khanyisa kukhanya kwemalungelo ebantfu emhlabeni ngibongela uNkulunkulu wakho lo wadala imfambatana nembali nensika yekukhanya kwemalungelo ebantfu emhlabeni ngibongela lesive seSouth Africa ngibongele umhlaba wonke jikelele lamhla uhlangene utovuma ukuthi vele wenda umsebenzi lomkhulu ubelambu siyakubonga Jongilanga siyakubonga Msuthu siyakubonga Dalinjebo siyakubonga Buswayo Mfenelisa ungumake wesive nanamhla sitovuma kona lokho ukuthi ungumake wesive ngipheletelwa ingelozi tekhanya titokubonga ngipheletelwa ingelozi legcina emabhuku eTV lokhulumela ko ingelozi yokukhanya emhlabeni ulamshisa ithini sisi indzaba yamake batshele bakulalela.
Holy One, standing God at the sacred garden. Can you hear the call? Your messengers of light bring you word of the nations. We bring you praise for giving us the gift of the warrior who picked up the spear when Utata Madiba was down and fought the fight until it was won.
Musho.
For the mother who embraced all of the Bantu clan.
Musho.
For the sacred star, blazing light that you brought for the people's rights.
Yes.
And you, flower of Madikizela, Mandela, Batembu, we thank you for being the warrior for Africa, for Jongilizwe, for Jonguhlanga, Talunjebo. Thank you for being the warrior. You are now a part of God's army. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Mthembu. Mthembu. Dalinjeni. Buswayo. Msuthu. Siyabonga Mthembu. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nosipho. On the 2nd of April 2018, we received the sad news of the passing of Winnie Mandela, a heroine and icon of the liberation struggle who sacrificed so much in the fight against the brutal apartheid regime. For her dedication to the people of South Africa during the darkest days of apartheid, and her tenacity to create a society free from racial oppression, she was affectionately referred to as the mother of the nation. Today we mourn. Today we celebrate the life of this remarkable woman who fought for social justice and dignity in South Africa, Africa, and the world. I now have the honor to invite our first speaker, the United Nations Secretary General António Guterres, to kindly deliver his statement.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored to be joining with you to pay tribute to the memory of Miss Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. I extend my deepest condolences to the government and people of South Africa and to the family of the late Miss Madikizela-Mandela. Mama Winnie, as she was affectionately known, was a towering figure in the struggle against apartheid. She was an international symbol of resistance who left an indelible mark on the history of the 20th century. The outpouring of condolences since her passing shows what an enormous impact she had not only on the people of South Africa and on the African continent, but for millions around the world. Faced with the most heinous of racist and discriminatory regimes, she helped lead the way in showing that it takes to overcome such tyranny, strength, defiance, and courage. She endured surveillance, harassment, torture, and imprisonment, including in solitary confinement, making huge personal sacrifices. Yet, through her resistance, she inspired countless others and helped keep hope alive through the darkest periods of the struggle. As she noted in remarks following the heart-wrenching Soweto uprising, and I quote, "We are aware that the road before us is uphill, but we shall fight to the bitter end for justice." End of quote. None of us would condone all actions over a complex and complicated life, but Winnie Mandela's dedication was evident in her early activism and her work researching infant mortality in the Alexander Township. And she was the first black social worker at the Baragwanath Hospital in Johannesburg and witnessed the insidious effects of apartheid on the health and social well-being of her community. As a strong and fearless woman, she had to fight patriarchy definitions of womanhood. In apartheid South Africa, the combination of patriarchy and racism together meant that black women confronted enormous obstacles from the cradle to the grave, making their own achievements all the more exceptional. Her advocacy for women's rights, including in her role as president of the ANC Women's League, reflected a dedication to justice. And their support of young people and their crucial contribution to a society's development also highlighted their commitment to the inclusion and rights of groups often overlooked. In the decades-long fight against apartheid, the United Nations stood with Winnie Madikizela-Mandela and all those in South Africa who faced unrelenting racism and discrimination. Today, as we remember her, the United Nations reaffirms its commitment to the ideals of equality, justice, and humanity for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. Alice Walker wrote a poem, and I just want to quote one verse from her. Winnie Mandela, we love you. If we had known you in a time of peace, we would have loved. Your peacefulness, your quiet so deep, it did not hear the call to fight. For helping us recognize the eternity you have been with us before. Winnie Mandela, sister, we love you. Yours is the contemporary face of the mother of the human race. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Laichak, President of the United Nations General Assembly, to deliver his statement.
Excellencies, Mr. Secretary General, Madam Deputy Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. In every period of history, there are some people who are different to others. And that's because they are willing to sacrifice everything to change the world around them. And we owe a great debt to people like this. Their sacrifices benefit all of those who come after them. And the sacrifices, in a small or serious way, change the course of history. I do not think any of us could deny that Winnie Madikizela-Mandela is one of these people. And that's why we are all gathered here today, to pay tribute to her. Now she's gone, but her legacy remains. And as we remember her, I'd like to make 2 points on how Ms. Madikizela-Mandela helped to change the world around her. The first relates to the political and social structures of her own country. In the early years of her life, Ms. Madikizela-Mandela became outraged by the poverty, inequality, and racism that she encountered. So she turned towards political activism, and she stood up against the apartheid regime. But she was met with strong resistance. She was taken away from her children. She was imprisoned. She was tortured. Yet she continued to demand an end to injustice. And she inspired many others to do the same, both within and outside the borders of South Africa. My second point is on the contribution of Ms. Madikizela-Mandela to the changing role of women. In the early 900s, women started to become active in South Africa's liberation struggle. Ms. Madikizela-Mandela built on this work. She refused to accept the limits of patriarchy, and she carved out her own space in politics, in society, and in the history books. This changed how women are seen. It helped to pull down barriers. It led to women's rights being enshrined in South Africa's new constitution. It also ensured that the reconciliation process which followed was shaped by women. And I believe there were ripple effects on the international stage. Over the past decades, we have done much more to strengthen the role of women in peace-building and reconciliation processes. They are the educators, community leaders, local mediators, and peace brokers. And we now know that no efforts to build peace can work without them. Perhaps this is not something we immediately think of when we pay tribute to Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, but her contribution cannot be overlooked. Excellencies, as I conclude, I'd like to express my sincere condolences. And I'd like to, again, pay tribute to the life of Ms. Madikizela-Mandela. Her voice was loud, her resilience was inspiring, and her sacrifices changed the course of history. Like I said, we owe her a great debt, and remembering her today is one way of repaying it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last night, Haarlem celebrated the life of Ma Winnie, reminding us that when she fought, she also fought for people of African descent everywhere. 28 years ago, when Winnie and Nelson Mandela visited the United States, they received an emotional welcome. They visited 8 cities, and tens of thousands of people lined the sidewalks. Please welcome Emile Michel from Haiti.
We fought for so long in the forefront of the world. We fell down like Toussaint Louverture, Delgrès, MacDougall. But we rise back up with the voice of Bob Marley, the fist of Muhammad Ali, the legacy of Winnie Mandela. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ça y mette vie en danger. La paix pour un jour, ça qu'a changé. L'homme maintenant, yon pas songé. L'espoir d'un air, pour ça y conviction, yo exilé. Qui campe, qui dans toute cause mêlée. Ça y qui remette, l'honneur campé. Benio, Benio, bless them, Father, bless them, Father. Yeah. Bless them, bless them, bless them, Father. Oh, bless them, bless them, bless them, bless them, Father. Yeah. Those would put themselves last and always stand and fight for freedom. They always, 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 never, never, they will never be afraid to speak their truth, to speak for change. This is their contribution. Oh, no pas j'oublier. Benio, Benio, bless them, Father, bless them, Father. Oh, Benio, Benio, Papa. Oh, Benio, Beni moun ki pa parle, Papa. Fakou Benio, moun ki pa parle danger. Oh, fakou Benio, wa Beni fami moun sayo. Bless them, Father, qui t'ont pas pour la vérité. Et Papa Benio, Papa Benio, Papa Benio. Benio, Papa Benio, you are Benio, you are Benio, you are Benio, Benio, Papa. Yayo Ikawa.
Thank you very much, Emmeline. And at this stage, this Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly will be taking leave from us. Thank you very much. And so we will continue with our program. As we said, this is a live broadcast in South Africa and I think in the internet, all over the world. And so we will try to keep as much time as possible. And we then continue. You know, throughout the time that Nelson Mandela spent on Robben Island, Mama Winnie kept the flames of resistance burning. And she did so not just as the wife of Nelson Mandela, but as Winnie Mandela. And so I will invite the representatives of the regional groups to deliver short remarks in their capacities as chairs of their respective groups for the month of April 2018. And we will start with inviting His Excellency, Mr. Isa Konforu, Permanent Representative of Mali.
Dear Ambassador of South Africa, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on Monday, 2nd April of 2018, the sad news was released. One of our freedom fighters' icon, Mama Winnie Mandela, has lost her last battle. On this sad occasion, I have the great honor and privilege, on behalf of the African group, to express our heartfelt condolences to the Mandela families. Dear Brother Jerry, the African group stand by you and your mission at this such occasion, and we want you to convey our sincere sympathy and solidarity with the people and the government of South Africa. Today, we are gathered to celebrate one of our greatest daughters of Africa, Winnie Mandela. She was born on September 26, 1936, in Bizana, a rural village in South Africa. Today, the African group pays tribute to the legacy of a freedom fighter, Winnie Mandela, alongside with her husband, Madiba, and the rest of the group, Buthelezi, Susulu Walter, Olivier Tambo, and others. She fought for the just causes in South Africa and the rest of our continent. Indeed, Winnie Mandela will be remembered as a revered struggle icon in the fight against apartheid and discrimination. I still remember her paying tribute in December 2013 to her late husband, Madiba. Winnie said, I quote, "I remember the day you met my father and asked to marry me. And my father said to me, Nelson is a handsome boy. You can marry him. But choosing him is like getting married to a fight, a struggle, not a man." End of quote. As you can see, she devoted her entire life as a revolutionary, a community worker, and advocate for the emancipation of women. In fact, before joining the political field, she demonstrated her deep commitment for dignity and well-being as a medical social worker. Her fight and her contribution will be engraved in the history of South Africa, of our continent, and throughout the world. In addition to all these qualities I just mentioned, Winnie had been also a great wife too. Her husband, Nelson Mandela, declared upon his release from jail in February 11, 1990, I quote, "My salutation would be incomplete without expressing my deep appreciation for the strength given to me during my long and lonely years in jail by my beloved wife and family." End of quote. Dear colleagues, the exceptional courage of this champion of justice and equality will remain an inspiration for the present and future generations in her country, South Africa, her beloved continent, Africa, and the rest of the world. I conclude by underlining the fact that the best way to pay tribute to the life and time of Winnie Mandela is to keep engraved the spirit of her devotion for dignity, justice, equality in our societies and throughout the world. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. At this stage, I would like to acknowledge the presence amongst us of former Mayor of the City of New York, Mr. David Dinkins. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Kiari, Permanent Representative of Tunisia, to deliver a statement on behalf of the Arab Group.
أصحاب السعادة زملاء الأفاضل السيدات والسادة، بقلوب يكتنفها الحزن والأسى تنعى المجموعة العربية بنيويورك رمز النضال وصوت المستضعفين الفقيدة المأسوف على فراقها ويني ميديكيزيلا مانديلا سيدة إفريقيا. لقد اشتهرت الفقيدة بنضالها ضد نظام الأبارتheid من منطلق اقتناعها الراسخ بمبادئ العدل والمساواة في الحقوق والواجبات ونبذ التفرقة وكافة أشكال التمييز على أساس اللون أو العرق أو المعتقد أو الجنس. وقد كلفها نضالها من أجل هذه المبادئ النبيلة السجن والتعذيب والمنفى، ولكنها مع ذلك لم تتراجع عن قضيتها إلى حين سقوط نظام الأبارتheid ببلادها وتحقيق العدل والمساواة بين كافة المواطنين دون تفرقة أو تهميش. ولم تقف مسيرة الفقيدة عند هذا الحد، فقد اطلعت بدور ريادي في بلورة مقومات الدولة الحديثة المتصالحة مع نفسها ومع أبنائها، حيث كانت من دعاة الوفاق بين كافة مكونات المجتمع الجنوب الإفريقي ومن رعاة المصالحة دون ما تشفن أو إقصاء. ولأن النفس النضالي لا ينضب، فقد اتخذت الفقيدة من الدفاع عن حقوق المرأة محورا لتحركاتها خلال السنوات الأخيرة من عمرها، وكذلك الشأن لحقوق المهاجرين. وقد مثلت نضالات ويني مانديلا محل اعتراف إقليمي ودولي، حيث حازت على عديد الأوسمة ومعلقات الشرف التي ستظل شاهدة على تضحياتها ونضالاتها من أجل شعبها ومبادئها، ولكن أيضا من أجل الشعوب الإفريقية وفي العالم في سبيل الحرية وكرامة الذات البشرية. ولأن كانت خسارتنا كبيرة بانتفاء نجمة مضيئة في سماء الأمل والحرية، فإن عزاءنا أن التاريخ قد سجل اسمها بين الأمجاد بحروف من ذهب، وأنها قد ضربت من نفسها مثلا عاليا سيحتذيه الكثيرون. مع فائق شكرنا للبعثة الدائمة لجنوب أفريقيا ولكل من ساهم في إنجاح هذا الحدث الذي سيبقى عالقا في الأذهان. وشكرا.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Tae-Jul, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea, on behalf of the Asia Pacific Group.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to mourn the loss and to commemorate the life of the great Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, one of the most renowned global icons in the struggle against racial injustice. First of all, I'd like to extend, on behalf of all member states of the Asia-Pacific Group, my deepest condolences and sympathies to the family of the deceased, the South African government and people, as well as to all those around the world touched by her inspiring lifelong struggle for equality. I would also like to express my appreciation to Ambassador J. Machila, Permanent Representative of South Africa, for organizing today's memorial service. It is indeed fitting that today's memorial service is taking place in the Trusteeship Council, as this august chamber has borne witness to the struggle for self-determination and equality over the years. Excellencies, Madame Madikizela-Mandela, a true pioneer, became South Africa's first black social worker in 1958 when she started working at a hospital in Soweto. Often referred to as the mother of the nation, she won the respect and admiration of South Africa, the African continent, and the broader international community, including in the Asia Pacific, for her leadership and advocacy for women, her community, and her nation. Indeed, her spirit transcended borders during her life and will unquestionably continue to do so following her passing away. In her lifetime, Madame Madikizela-Mandela was asked to shoulder a burden few of us will ever be called upon to bear. Her steadfastness and vocal opposition to apartheid during her imprisonment and house arrest, as well as during the 27-year incarceration of her husband, Nelson Mandela, helped shine a light on the struggle against racial injustice. This undoubtedly helped steer public sentiment against the brutality and discrimination manifested by the apartheid regime. During Nelson Mandela's imprisonment on Robben Island, Madame Madikizela-Mandela famously said, and I quote, "They think because they have put my husband on an island that he will be forgotten. They are wrong. The harder they try to silence him, the louder I will become." Despite spending over a year in solitary confinement, where she was subjected to unthinkable torture, being separated from her daughters, and even having her home firebombed, Madame Madikizela-Mandela continued to speak out loudly. After Nelson Mandela's release and the long overdue fall of apartheid, she served as South Africa's First Lady and a variety of posts within the South African government with distinction, continuing to inspire those both near and far. The loss of Madame Madikizela-Mandela is indeed a tragedy for the people and nation she loved and devoted her life to. This time of national remembrance for the South African people brings all of us around the world together, not only to mourn, but also to reflect on the values she spent her life ardently fighting for. These values, a commitment to fighting against tyranny, discrimination, and injustice, should serve as an inspiration to all of us here at the United Nations. Today, as we mourn the loss of this towering figure, let us also draw strength from the resilience she showed throughout her remarkable life and be guided by her indomitable will in our collective efforts to make the world a better place to live. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of days ago, I watched the televised memorial service of Madame Madikizela-Mandela held at the stadium in Soweto. This brought me back to the memorial service for Nelson Mandela that I had the great honor to personally attend as a member of the Korean delegation. I still have such vivid, resonant memories of witnessing the spectacular scene of nearly 80,000 mourners packed into the stadium, singing and dancing, not weeping, as heavy rain fell over all those in attendance, including many renowned leaders from around the world. I'm confident today that Madam Madikizela-Mandela will be rejoining her former husband in heaven for a celebratory reunion. May she rest in eternal peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I just want to remind the speakers that we have very limited time, since this is a televised broadcast, to really keep to the time allocated to them. I invite Her Excellency Ms. Pejevic, Charge d'Affaires at Interim of Montenegro, on behalf of the Eastern European Group.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great sadness that we have learned about the passing of Madam Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, a prominent leader of the fight against apartheid in South Africa. On behalf of the members of the Group of Eastern European States, I have a privilege to convey our heartfelt condolences and sincere regrets to her family, relatives and friends, as well as to the government and people of South Africa. Madam Madikizela-Mandela became a fearless leader of the struggle against apartheid and discrimination. She was a strong and courageous voice in the fight for equal rights and justice, and will be remembered as an international symbol of resistance to apartheid. She dedicated her life to liberating her country and making the dream of free and prosperous South Africa reality. Her resilience and vision transformed the lives of many South Africans. Madam Madikizela-Mandela fought relentlessly for rights and welfare of women in her country. I would like to voice again our respect to Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, who is an encouraging figure in the fight against patriarchy and an example of strength and determination for women around the world to follow. Her unwavering courage in confronting challenges will be remembered forever. We can all draw inspiration from the struggles that Madam Madikizela-Mandela fought and the dream of equitable, prosperous and better future for South Africa, to which she dedicated her life. We should all remember that each of us can make a difference in our societies in promoting peace, human rights, sustainable development and lives of dignity for all. May she rest in peace and her legacy of fight for liberation and justice live on. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, we have Ms. Kitty Sweep, Charge d'Affaires at Interim of Suriname, on behalf of Latin American and Caribbean Group.
Ambassador of South Africa, Excellencies, on behalf of the Group of Latin American and Caribbean States, I would firstly like to express our most heartfelt condolences on the passing of Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. As the Secretary General said in his message on this sad news, she was a leading figure in the forefront of the struggle against apartheid in South Africa and a strong and fearless voice for equal rights. During her more than 40 years of battle, Winnie became not only one of the greatest icons of the fight against the segregationist regime in her country, but also a political and moral reference for the entire African continent and all humanity. She was a woman of great courage and sensitivity, and the support and voice of Nelson Mandela during his long years of unjust imprisonment, defying constant harassment against herself and her family, repression, persecutions, and even arrests and torture inflicted upon her on a number of occasions. That is the reason why she will always be remembered as a symbol of resistance, because she never doubted that her struggle for freedom and democracy would be crowned with triumph. Her struggle did not end with the liberation of Nelson and the fall of the apartheid regime. As an emblematic figure of the African National Congress in the new South Africa, Winnie was president of the Women's League of this political group and Minister of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology in the first government after the end of apartheid. Then she continued to embrace the best causes of her people as a tireless advocate for the dispossessed and the marginalized through intense community work, especially in Soweto, until the end of her life. She was an extraordinary woman, mother and combatant, rightly called the mother of the South African nation. Your Excellencies, Winnie Mandela's legacy has gone beyond the borders of her country and the African continent. The Latin and American Caribbean countries, to which Africa has brought an extraordinary cultural heritage and contributed to the formation of our nations, feel these hours of mourning as our own. Our efforts to achieve more just and democratic societies where equal rights and social justice for all, without distinction of race, ethnicity, religion, or cultural prevail, will always have Winnie Mandela's work as a benchmark. The renewed commitment of the countries of our region to contribute to the total elimination of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance that still persist in the world will bear the imprint of the ideas championed by Winnie all her life. In December 2013, Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "Death is something inevitable. When a man has done what he considers to be his duty to his people and his country, he can rest in peace," end quote. These words are also reflected in the life and work of Winnie Mandela. She can rest in peace because she fulfilled her duty and left us a unique legacy. Winnie has gone away physically, but her lessons and strength will serve as an inspiration for present and future generations and for building a more just and democratic society. Our deepest feelings of solidarity go to her family and the people and government of the Republic of South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Gunnarsson, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Ireland, on behalf of the Western European and other groups.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Group of Western European and other states. On behalf of the group, I wish to offer our sincere condolences to the government and people of the Republic of South Africa on the death of Ms. Winifred Nomzamo Madikizela-Mandela, better known around the world as Winnie Mandela. Ms. Winnie Mandela led a remarkable life. Her exceptional abilities and leadership qualities shone through early. Despite tragedies in her own family, as a woman, and indeed a rural woman, she made it through to higher education. She continued throughout her life to campaign on social issues affecting women. This included the fight against HIV/AIDS, where she campaigned for free antiretroviral medicines and highlighted the number of young women and girls affected by the epidemic. This and her contact with those suffering extreme poverty and discrimination due to the injustices of the apartheid system led to her political awakening. As an activist during South Africa's apartheid regime, a community worker and an advocate for the rights of women, Winnie Mandela made a unique contribution to the South Africa we see today. She was a member of that proud generation of leaders who battled and survived in the most brutal period of terror under apartheid South Africa. Her marriage to Nelson Mandela was marked by the tragedy of his incarceration for much of their joint lives, keeping them separate for 27 years. As Desmond Tutu, Nobel laureate and Archbishop, said recently, she refused to be bowed by the imprisonment of her husband, perpetual harassment of her family by security forces, detentions, bannings, and banishments. And he went on to talk of the deeply inspirational effect of Winnie Mandela's courageous defiance on himself and generations of activists. Given the nature of the struggle that Winnie Mandela was involved in, it is perhaps not surprising that some consider her controversial, but she remained a force to be reckoned with, and having played an important role in defeating the evils of apartheid, she remained firm in holding the post-apartheid government to account. Winnie Mandela will remain a towering figure and source of inspiration in and beyond Africa. We join the people of South Africa in mourning her passing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now invite Ambassador Fatima Mohammed, Permanent Observer of the African Union, to deliver her remarks.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to participate in this solemn memorial service to honor the life and legacies of late Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, affectionately known in South Africa as Mama Winnie, the Mother of Nation. I submit to you that we are here today not to mourn, for death is inevitable, but rather to celebrate life, a life of an iconic and legendary South African activist, fearless in the just struggle against apartheid, unshakable in her conviction that all men are created equal. She remains a symbol of the anti-apartheid struggle. No doubt, her position as the first Black female social worker and later as head of the African National Congresswomen's League, not only emboldened her advocacy for the rights and welfare of women, but also paved the way for becoming one of the stalwarts of the global movement, leading to the adoption of the Beijing Platform, putting the plight of women, not only in South Africa, but the entire continent and around the world, at center stage. As one of the eminent persons invited to attend the 5th Africa Regional Conference, ahead of the Beijing Conference, Mama Winnie, then Deputy Minister of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology of South Africa, in her remarks, amongst other things, lamented the few women that ever make it to cabinet were usually assigned to the lesser tasks of welfare, community development, culture, cooperatives, while portfolios like defense, industry, commerce, foreign affairs, economic planning, and finance were usually considered the preserve of male ministers. Today, as we gather here on this solemn occasion, we are confronted by the fact that Mama Winnie left this world as a first-hand witness to a blossoming of the seeds planted by her words. A growing list of women who have emerged both in South Africa, and other parts of the world at the helm of heads of states, foreign ministers, including institutions like the United Nations, where we see a strong commitment and push to achieve parity in leadership position, starting with the UN Deputy Secretary General and the African Union's sustained gender parity at the level of commissioners. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mama Winnie, on whose shoulders I and many others dare to stand today, remains a symbol of hope and resilience in the global struggle for equality and social justice for humanity. While extending our deepest condolences to the family of late Mama Winnie and to the government and people of South Africa, allow me to conclude in recalling the statement issued by the African Union chairperson on April 2nd, bringing into remembrance Mama Winnie's fearless campaign and her sacrifice for much of her life for freedom in South Africa. May her soul rest in peace, and may we continue to multiply and build upon her lessons and strength. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We will now continue with the next group of speakers that will be representatives of other member states. And I have the honor of first calling Her Excellency Ms. Eccles Curry, Deputy Permanent Representative of the United States, to give a statement.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, I'm honored to speak to you today as the representative of the United States, as the host country of the United Nations headquarters here in New York. Thank you, Jerry, for the kind invitation to this important event to pay respect and offer condolences on the passing of an anti-apartheid icon. It is truly an honor to be here. The United States offers its sympathies to the family and friends, as well as to the nation that mourns the loss of Winnie Mandela. We join in honoring her formidable strength and the leadership that she showed in the struggle to end apartheid. Most importantly, we must all continue to pursue with vigor the vision of equality and humanity that embodied the highest aspirations of that struggle. In the past several months, we've seen the deaths of other leaders in the anti-apartheid struggle. As this generation of leaders passes, we honor them and their contributions. We remain committed to honoring their enduring legacy, including that of President Nelson Mandela, who would have turned 100 years old in July. And in doing so, remember all those who participated in the struggle that brought an end to apartheid in South Africa. As this generation passes, we must also look to the future and the next generation of leaders across politics, arts, business, academia, and every sector where they are truly needed to bring the hope of South Africa into fruition. We are proud to support many of these young leaders through academic and cultural exchange programs, such as the Young African Leaders Initiative and the Mandela Washington Fellows Program. And we are certain that they would make their forebears proud with their contributions to the future of their nation. Winnie Mandela inspired a generation of women who now lead South African ministries, academia, research, business, and civil society, and our engagement with them is especially rewarding. They contribute to the warm and friendly relationship between our two countries, strengthening our partnership based on shared commitment to democracy, security, and peace. Mama Winnie was truly an icon and always a presence. She was who she was, and she never apologized for being herself. She was a daughter of Africa who never forgot where she came from. She never moved away from Soweto, preferring to remain close to the people and their daily struggles until her final days. It is my great honor to be here with you and to celebrate her wonderful life and look forward to the future of her great nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I invite His Excellency, Mr. Akbaruddin, Permanent Representative of India.
Organizers of this memorial service, my good friend, Ambassador Jerry Medjala, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Rare are occasions that we join together at the United Nations to commemorate a life and mourn the passing away of an icon who soldiered to translate into reality the values that all of us espouse from various podiums in this organization. Many before me have spoken of Mama Winnie's unyielding courage in the face of the horrors perpetrated by the apartheid regime. Others have spoken of what her life symbolized in terms of gender equality and social change. All these perspectives are rich portrayals of how a hero is perceived differently depending on which facet one focuses on to highlight a virtue or a shortcoming. I, however, venture to speak from the vantage point of how Mama Winnie's struggles epitomized the thinking that permeated many debates at the UN from its early days. May I recall for all of us that the United Nations General Assembly, in its very first session, began considering aspects of the issue of apartheid. The first reference to this pernicious practice that Mama Winnie fought against all her life was contained in Resolution 103 of 19th November 1946. And the resolution declared, it is in the higher interest of humanity to put an end to the so-called racial persecution. It then called upon all governments to conform both to the letter and spirit of the Charter and to take the most prompt and energetic steps to that end. Following that, the General Assembly, in its 5th session, in its 6th session, held that the policy of racial segregation or apartheid is based on racial discrimination. This then led to the affirmation on 5th December 1952 that policies that are designed to perpetuate or increase racial discrimination are inconsistent with Article 56 of the UN Charter. From then on till 1994, the item on apartheid figured on the agenda of the General Assembly year after year. Even while many of our predecessors here argued against apartheid as essentially undermining the UN Charter, the definitive battle to rid the world of the evil of apartheid was fought on the streets of South Africa. It was here that fearless fighters such as Winnie Mandela faced the violence wreaked by a pernicious regime. Even as Madiba and other political leaders were kept locked in the cells of Robben Island or were forced into exile, so Winnie Mandela was a fellow traveler of diplomats in the global battle against apartheid. In fact, she was the sword arm whose courage inspired generations of diplomats of many countries, including mine, to join in support of those who fought against apartheid in South Africa. What we spoke about, she acted upon. What she practiced in South Africa, we preached here at the United Nations. It was the fortitude of exemplars of equal rights, such as Winnie Mandela, that made many of our predecessors here stand firm for more than 40 years. Our predecessors stood by those like Mrs. Winnie Mandela, who fought against apartheid in the belief that those who fight for justice, truth, and oppressed have friends in every country and in every continent. Mama Winnie's struggles symbolized hope not only for the people of South Africa or the people of the African continent, but also for people all over the world who cherish equality. By paying tribute today to her achievements in the struggle against apartheid, we are honoring the noble values that the United Nations Charter stands for. In her demise, South Africa has lost a revered leader. The world of diplomacy, a trench warrior who symbolized the tangible fight against apartheid that diplomats from all parts of the world doggedly pursued here at the United Nations. As a country that first brought the issue of racism and racial discrimination to the United Nations, India cherishes Winnie Mandela's lifelong struggle for equality. In losing her, we have all lost a soldier who had worked tirelessly, relentlessly for the principle that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. I conclude with a quote from a famous Indian yoga master, which perhaps summarizes for us Winnie Mandela's life. There is a magnet in your heart that will attract true friends. That magnet is unselfishness, thinking of others first. When you learn to live for others, they will live for you. It is with this belief we join others in praying for Mama Winnie's eternal peace. I thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now I invite Her Excellency Mrs. Rodriguez Cameo, Permanent Representative of Cuba.
Dear brother, ambassadors of South Africa, Jerry Matila, Excellencies, brothers and sisters, it was with deep sadness that we received the news a few days ago about the passing of Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, a tireless fighter for the freedom of her people and a symbol of resistance against the apartheid regime. I wish to convey, on behalf of all Cuba, our most heartfelt condolence and sincere sentiments of solidarity to her family and to the government and people of South Africa. The apostle of our independence, José Martí, said, "Death is not true when the work of life has been fulfilled well." And Winnie was and is living history. She was Nelson's voice in the streets of her country and around the world while he was imprisoned by the apartheid regime for nearly 3 decades. Her spirit of resistance aroused the admiration of honorable people and also the fear of her enemies, who could never bring her to her knees. She has been rightly called the mother of the South African nation, but she was much more than that. Her motherly embrace transcended the borders of her homeland, because with the victory of the South African people over apartheid, Africa was reborn to become a different place. The world, at last, had to turn its gaze to Africa. In short, Winnie is the expression of the rebelliousness and firm spirit of all African women. She was a person very close to the Cubans. For us, she and Nelson have always been, are, and will be indivisible, two parts of a single symbol, of the same ideal. And this is how we will always remember her. For her, her struggles and dreams, one day we went back to Africa, and the imprint of Cuban sweat and blood stayed there. The image of Nelson and Winnie will always remain in the memory of many of us, very close together, with their feet held high, ready to overcome any adversity, pointing to the same direction. Mama Winnie left for immortality to join Madiba, along with Amilcar, Neto, Machel, Lumumba, Sankara, Nkrumah, and many other fighters for the African independence, who will be there to welcome her as well. And also Carlota, the rebellious African slave who was the symbol of the first struggle for freedom in my homeland, Cuba, as well as all Cubans who died on Africa's soil in the heroic act of settling our historical and eternal debt to Africa. From there, with all of them, Winnie will continue her fight. Winnie will always hold a special place in the hearts of Cubans who have embraced her struggle for more than 4 decades for the definitive emancipation of her country. We will also remember Winnie as a paradigm of the unbreakable bonds of friendship and solidarity between Cuba and South Africa, forged with the blood of their sons and daughters for many years of common struggles. Faced with Winnie Madikizela-Mandela's immense figure, Cuba renews its strong commitment to the noble causes of the African peoples and its readiness to continue to join them in their struggles, dreams, and hopes. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now we will listen to His Excellency Mr. Neville Hertz, Permanent Representative of Namibia and incoming Chair of the Southern African Development Community, to deliver his remarks.
How does one describe oneself? I leave that to my people to describe me. Over the years, I have told you over and over again, it has never been about me, the person. I have never regarded myself as an individual. I'm just part of this whole liberation mission. I have never been an individual. I belong to the collective. These are the words of Mama Winnie Mandela on being asked to describe herself, and even when offered the chance to highlight her own contributions, she always spoke of the collective and of the people she was fighting for. I am honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the Southern African Development Community Group of Ambassadors at the United Nations. We would like to pay tribute and respect to a fallen heroine, Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, who was a freedom fighter with a spirit that could not be conquered. The liberation movements across Southern Africa are still coming to terms with the loss of a struggle icon and an anti-apartheid campaigner, a woman who dedicated her life and that of her family for the liberation struggle in the Republic of South Africa from an early age and became affectionately known as Mother of the Nation. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela's fearless resistance to harassment and her unapologetic resistance to apartheid led to periods of imprisonment which were often spent in solitary confinement. Despite these hardships, she emerged ever defiant and brimming with more determination to bring about change in the lives of her brothers and sisters in the country and inspiring countless others in the SADC region. Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela was the essence of black female defiance against apartheid, oppression, racism, and imperialism. At a time when women were still seen as the weaker sex, Winnie Madikizela-Mandela's strength, tenacity, and spirit were in the inspiring light that many in South Africa and indeed in our region, in particular the frontline states of Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, drew inspiration from. In the frontline states, her message reverberated through the transmission belt of migrant labor and the underground communication networks. We stood in solidarity with the people and struggle of South Africa and mobilized international pressure to bring down the racist regime. Mama Winnie overcame apartheid and sexism to rise into the upper echelons of ANC leadership at a time when many thought her star will dim with the imprisonment of Nelson Mandela. She was the embodiment of what we here at the United Nations call the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, well before the historical resolution 1325, which was introduced in the Security Council under the guidance of my country, Namibia. That resolution speaks of the reality that women are not merely victims of conflict situations, but that they can and must play a role in conflict resolution, peace building, and leadership in their communities. Long before the United Nations was talking about this, Winnie Mandela was leading a movement and inspiring countless women in SADC as well as across the world to take up the mantle of leadership. It was notable that Mrs. Madikizela-Mandela never elevated herself above the people. In her own words, she said, and I quote, "I am the product of the masses of the country and the product of my enemy," unquote. Mrs. Mandela spoke and fought for the defenseless and won. She will be missed not only by those who were close to her and not only by the nation that she loved deeply and served proudly, but also by millions of men, women, and children who enjoy today's freedom because of the dreams she pursued. Her influence reached the whole of SADC and the international arena, where she will be equally missed. Her indomitable spirit could not be conquered. Instead, it ignited the flame of resistance in millions of young people inside the country and across borders in our region and globally. A statement we have heard over and over in the past weeks has been, and I quote, "Winnie did not die, she multiplied," unquote. And the youth of the region have been remembering her with this. Her defiance of the repressive laws and practices of segregation, her struggles to free her country from the most pernicious system, emboldened student movements and anti-apartheid movements in their fights for freedom and justice. Vivid in my mind as a young student is the image of a fearless woman, clenched fist in the air, leading in song. Zenzenina, what have we done? Or who can forget Siaya Ipitoli, marching straight into the face of the apartheid security forces, shouting, no justice, no peace. An injury to one is an injury to all. Maibuye, Africa, bring back Africa, Amandla, power to the people. Yes, indeed, a stalwart of the liberation movement, an icon of the struggle, fearless leader, a giant in the fight for justice, freedom, the right to self-determination, and human dignity. She was to all of us. Renowned South African poet, fondly known as the people's poet Mzwakhe Mbuli, in his powerful tribute this week, summed her character up in these beautiful words, I quote, she was allergic to cowardice and addicted to freedom, unquote. In his personal message to the family of Mama Winnie, His Excellency President Hage Geingob of Namibia tweeted, with the family, the people of South Africa, we are mourning the death of a freedom fighter, Comrade Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. Ma Winnie will be remembered as a symbol of a life of struggle for the oppressed people. President Geingob ends his tweet by crying out, fighters never die, they live on. Mama Winnie, mother of the nation, spear of the nation, you have fought the good fight. You have finished the race, but your legacy will live on to inspire generations to come, to never surrender to injustice, but to stand up for justice. Let us honor her memory by rededicating ourselves to the next phase of the struggle, the economic emancipation of the suffering masses. The struggle now is to lift the poor out of a life of hunger and despair, to bring universal health to people everywhere, to improve the quality of life for all, but most especially for the most vulnerable in the world. Let us ensure that no one is left behind. May the soul of this remarkable daughter of the soil now rest in eternal peace. Fare thee well. Hambagathle, Mama Winnie.
Thank you, Ambassador. I invite Professor Gay MacDougall, a member of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and a distinguished scholar in residence at the Leitner Center for International Law and Justice at Fordham University School of Law. But most importantly, Gay, I invite you as a sister who stood by us during the difficult times of struggle. Gay MacDougall.
My sister, Excellencies, and to all who fight against racism and for equality. Many here today have already spoken about the near unimaginable sacrifice, the suffering, and the unflinching courage of Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. Let me take these few minutes that I have, therefore, to talk about her as a visionary and a leader. Apartheid raged for decades in South Africa, and so did the people's struggle against it. In that wrenching campaign for freedom, justice, and equality, women were shrewd tacticians, effective organizers, and militant protesters. They played key roles in organizing at home and abroad. The African National Congress's Women's League emerged as the leading women's organization that honed and strengthened women's capacities for resistance and for an understanding of the possibilities of a better tomorrow. Thus, the ANC Women's League provided a leadership home for women. It became central as a vehicle for organizing women to be agents of change for the liberation of their country. Mama Winnie Mandela was one of the best of the leaders of the African National Congress's Women's League and served as president for several years. With her distinctive capacity for linking revolutionary thinking with resolute actions of defiance, she became a transformative leader for the women and the men of an oppressed nation. And when the leadership of the ANC were jailed for life or sent into exile, by the sheer force of her personal power of resistance, she rallied a despondent nation to continue the struggle. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said of her, "She was stubborn on behalf of our people because she knew that out of her stubborn disposition, she would be able to inspire millions of South Africans." Also, by taking a leadership role in Umkhonto we Sizwe, the military wing of the ANC, she shattered notions of a woman's place in liberation movements. And perhaps because she insisted on staying close and living with people in the townships, and because so many of her sister warriors came out of the trade union movement, she and they had a clear vision of a future South Africa in which black babies no longer died of hunger and all children would have an equal access to quality education. A South Africa in which poverty was a distant memory, and every South African lived in dignity. Because Winnie Madikizela-Mandela fought for these principles, for these ideals, all of her life, I'm proud to join the millions around the world to honor her and to send expressions of solidarity and condolences to her family and to the South African people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We will now watch a video message from Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, Under-Secretary General and Executive Director for UN Women, and this will be followed by a vote of thanks to be delivered by His Excellency Mr. Jerry Machila, Permanent Representative of South Africa.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you in bidding farewell to Mama Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, who left us rather suddenly, even though she was sick. She will be remembered in South Africa for her capacity to mobilize people of all ages, all over South Africa and beyond. From the 60s well into the 80s, when the apartheid system had suppressed political activity, when leaders and communities and different people that were making a difference were sent to prison, some went into exile, she was one of the outstanding voices that continued to make sure that those that were being made invisible remained visible. Those who were being silenced became louder. She was heard within South Africa and beyond South Africa. And because she was so courageous in the manner in which she confronted the system, she inspired many people who could have given up in the worst of time. Through her courage, many people found their own strength and their own courage, and they were able to stand up. I am one of the people who benefited from watching this woman fight the way she did. Once she had to speak and defend an old traditional leader who was an activist who was at risk of being banished. When the banishing homeland leader asked her, "You are speaking for this man. Where were you in the 60s when she was vilifying and making sure that he turns people against me?" Winnie said, "I was fighting the treason trial besides my husband." The homeland ruler asked again, "And where were you later when also he was instigating people against me into the 70s?" And Winnie said, "I was in prison. I was in solitary confinement. I was being tortured. And where were you when also he instigated young people against me?" And Winnie said, "As you know, I was banished. I was confined and restricted to an area that was not even my community, and I could not go anywhere." This captures and sums up the life of this woman. And her courage sometimes looked like it even intimidated the apartheid system. And that is what made her such an iconic leader. Because the system that people were afraid of, she was not afraid of. Instead, she made the system to be afraid of her. She was not just a wife of an iconic leader. She was an iconic leader in her own right, on whose shoulders many other leaders, men, women, children, young people, were able to stand and find their place in society. This is the memory we want to try and keep of this very important member of the South African community and part of our struggle. Thank you.
Ambassador from South Africa giving us the vote of thanks.
Program Director, Excellencies, colleagues, fellow South Africans, on behalf of South African government, on behalf of our people, and on behalf of the family of Madikizela-Mandela, we want to thank you. We want to thank you from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, from Caribbeans, from all over the world in paying tribute to Mama Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, but also for supporting us. Mayor Dinkins, we want to thank you for having walked with us during apartheid, having supported us during apartheid, and through you, can we also thank mayors, honorary citizens of the USA. And Gay MacDougall, can you take our thanks, our appreciation to anti-apartheid activists all over the world who, during difficult times, stood by the people of South Africa. Program Director, mine was to thank you. Colleagues, permanent representatives, in your big numbers present here, we want to thank you. And above all, in the absence I want to thank Secretary General. I want to thank the President of General Assembly. I want to thank the Under Secretary General who made this possible. They are not here, but with you colleagues, I want to thank you all. Poet, singers, thanks so much for this day. Thanks so much, and I hope you'll have a nice weekend. I want to thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador. And before we leave, I want to ask just a very, very simple request, and you will allow me to do so. I want to ask all the women in this chamber to rise. All the women in this chamber to rise. And I want to ask of you not only to honor Ma Winnie by singing her praises, but I want to ask you to take the front seat in the struggle for social justice, respect for human dignity, gender equality, and solidarity. As was said yesterday, let us listen with our ears and hear with our hearts like Mama Winnie did. And let us change the narrative to lift our people out of poverty into a world of prosperity. Let her continue to remind us of our duty to serve the marginalized, the vulnerable, and those who have without a voice. It was a real honor for me to be part of this memorial service. Mama Winnie Mandela is well alive in our hearts. I want to ask Ismail and Kevin to come forward and to give us a special song as a bridge to Mama Winnie. You may sit down, my sisters.
Please, you may sing with me.
I just have an announcement to make. Those who would love to sign the book of condolences, it's on the third floor, just on the upper level from here. Amandla. Amandla. Thank you very much.
And those were some live visuals from New York for the UN Special Memorial from Mama Winnie Madikizela. What an amazing tribute.